Have you ever heard of a disaster so shocking that it claimed 5,500 lives in a single night in Australia? This story isn't about a natural catastrophe, but a man-made one, a naval battle that became one of the darkest moments in Australian history. This is the story of the HMAS Sydney. Imagine it's November 1941. The world is engulfed in the Second World War. Australia, though far from the main European theatre, is deeply involved. The HMAS Sydney was the pride of the Royal Australian Navy, a light cruiser that had already seen glorious victories in the Mediterranean. It was a symbol of national strength and hope. After its heroic service overseas, the Sydney returned to Australian waters for what was supposed to be a quieter role. Escorting troop ships, it was on one of these missions, sailing back to port after escorting the Zealandia, that fate intervened. On the afternoon of November 19th, off the coast of Western Australia, the Sydney spotted an unidentified merchant ship. Following standard naval procedure, Captain Joseph Burnett ordered his ship to investigate. The vessel identified itself as the Dutch freighter Strat Malacca, but something was off. The ship seemed reluctant to respond to signals. Its behavior was suspicious. The Sydney, a powerful warship, closed in to get a better look, to be absolutely sure of the other ship's identity. This decision, made with the best of intentions, would prove to be fatal. The Strat Malacca was a lie. In reality, it was the German auxiliary cruiser Cormoran, a heavily armed merchant raider disguised to prey on Allied shipping. Its mission was to sink as many enemy vessels as possible, disrupting supply lines. The Cormoran's captain, Theodore Detmers, knew he was outgunned by the Sydney. His only chance was the element of surprise. He played a deadly game of cat and mouse, luring the Australian cruiser closer and closer into a range where his hidden guns would be lethally effective. The Sydney pulled alongside the Cormoran, almost within hailing distance. It was at this moment, with the Australian sailors likely relaxed, that the trap was sprung. The Cormoran dropped its disguise, raised the German naval ensign, and unleashed a devastating barrage of fire at point-blank range. Shells and torpedoes slammed into the HMAS Sydney before it could even bring its main guns to bear. The first salvos were catastrophic. They struck the bridge, wiping out the command structure, and hit the forward gun turrets, incapacitating the Sydney's primary armament. The ship was crippled in the opening seconds of the engagement. Despite the horrific initial damage, the crew of the Sydney fought back with incredible bravery. They managed to fire their secondary guns, scoring hits on the Cormoran and starting fires that would ultimately doom the German raider as well. But the damage to the Sydney was too severe. Engulfed in flames, listing heavily, its communication systems destroyed. The proud cruiser was dying. As darkness fell over the Indian Ocean, the survivors on the Cormoran watched the distant glow of the burning Sydney disappear over the horizon. The Australian warship, with its entire crew of 645 men, vanished without a trace. For days, Australia waited for news. The Sydney was overdue. An massive air and sea search was launched, but it found nothing. No wreckage, no lifeboats, no survivors. It was as if the ship and its crew had sailed off the edge of the earth. The nation was plunged into a state of shock and disbelief. How could a victorious, powerful warship just disappear off its own coast? The loss of 645 sailors in one go was a national tragedy, a wound that cut deep into the Australian psyche. The mystery of what happened to HMAS Sydney haunted Australia for decades, without any survivors from the Sydney. The only account of the battle came from the 318 German sailors from the Cormoran who made it to shore in lifeboats and were taken as prisoners of war. Their story of a close-quarters battle was met with skepticism and suspicion by many Australians. How could a mere raider defeat the mighty Sydney? Conspiracy theories flourished for over 60 years. Was there a third party involved? Perhaps a Japanese submarine? Was the German account a fabrication to cover up a war crime? The lack of physical evidence left these questions unanswered, deepening the pain of the families who had lost their loved ones. It wasn't until 2008 that the mystery was finally solved. An extensive deep-sea search, led by the shipwreck hunter David Mearns, located the wrecks of both the Cormoran and the HMAS Sydney, lying on the ocean floor, about 12 nautical miles apart, over 2 kilometers deep. The discovery was a moment of immense national significance. The underwater footage of the wrecks confirmed the German account of the battle. The catastrophic damage to the Sydney's bow and bridge was clearly visible, validating the story of a surprise attack at close range. The final resting place of the 645 men had been found. So where does the number 5,500 come from? This is where the story takes an even more tragic turn, one that is often overlooked. The HMAS Sydney was meant to be the escort for a troopship called the Zealandia. On its next voyage just a few months later, in February 1942, the now escorted Zealandia was part of a convoy trying to reinforce the island of Timor when it was attacked by Japanese bombers during the bombing of Darwin. The ship was sunk, and while many were rescued, the loss of this vital transport contributed to the eventual fall of Timor. But the truly staggering figure connects back to the original mission. Had the Sydney survived its encounter with the Cormoran, it would have been the designated escort for the convoy that was carrying the Australian 8th Division to Singapore. Without its powerful naval guardian, the convoy sailed with a much lighter escort. The troops arrived, only to be caught up in the disastrous fall of Singapore in February 1942, the largest surrender in British military history. Of the thousands of Australian soldiers captured, more than 5,500 would die in the horrific conditions of Japanese prisoner of war camps. From starvation, disease, and brutal treatment on projects like the infamous Thai-Burma Railway. It's a chilling chain of events. The loss of one ship, the HMAS Sydney, and its 645 crew created a void in Australia's defences. This vulnerability had a direct, devastating domino effect, leading to the capture and subsequent death of another 5,500 Australian soldiers. When you add these numbers together, the sinking of the HMAS Sydney was not just a single naval tragedy. It was the catalyst for a much larger catastrophe that cost Australia over 6,000 lives. The story of HMAS Sydney is a powerful reminder of the brutal realities of war and the interconnectedness of events. It's a story of heroism in the face of impossible odds, of a nation's long search for answers, and the profound, cascading impact of a single, tragic event. The discovery of the wreck brought closure, but it also cemented the legacy of the Sydney as a symbol of sacrifice. Today, memorials across Australia honor the men who were lost, ensuring that their story and the wider tragedy it represents is never forgotten. Thank you for watching. If you found this piece of history as compelling as I do, please like this video and subscribe for more stories from the past. See you next time.